Iowa became a territory on July 4th of 1838. In 1839, the U.S. Congress authorized 2 roads in the new territory. One road went south from Dubuque to the Missouri border. The other road ran 76 miles west from the city of Burlington to the Indian Territory. Neither road amounted to much by today's standards. They were little more than plowed-up prairie with marks cut into trees. One historian reported that the roads were
muddy, sticky quagmire when it rained, slippery, icy slopes when it snowed, rutted, ridged pathways when the weather was pleasant.
The Burlington route was originally called the Indian Agency Trail because it followed the path the Sauk and Meskwaki used to get from their agency to Burlington. It later became known as Agency Road. Indian trails often used the paths made by buffaloes because they followed ridges to avoid swamps and marshes as well as the spring and fall floods. Thousands of travelers crossed the Mississippi River into Burlington in the 1800s. Some were U.S. citizens, many were immigrants. In 1855, the flood of pioneers reached its peak when up to 700 wagons were ferried across the river each day. Most of these travelers did not remain in Burlington. Many were headed west to Homestead. Others were destined for the gold fields, hoping to strike it rich. With luck, an experienced wagon driver could cover about 20 miles a day. Let's travel the Agency Road and discover its history as we go. The road began near what was then the western edge of Burlington and went up a ridge between 2 large ravines. At the top of the hill, we find a historical marker. It reads,
"To commemorate the Agency Trail and the Plank Road, Pathways of the Pioneers."
The Burlington to Mount Pleasant Plank Road was opened in 1851. It followed Agency Road for a few miles and then branched off to the northwest. Plank roads were surfaced with wooden slats to create an all-weather roadway. Most plank roads went out of business when train travel made them obsolete. Travel a little further on Agency Road, we approach the intersection with Highway 61. In the early days, this area would have been a prairie. Most of Iowa was prairie land except for wooded areas near streams and rivers. If a wagon started at dawn, it would have gone a few miles to get to this spot in about an hour. Then they would stop to let the animals take a short break. In 1915, the view would have looked like this. It was some of the first paved road in Iowa. In the late 1800s, it would have looked like this. Today, it looks like this. At the intersection with Highway 406, Agency Road continued straight west, and the Plank Road followed 406 to Highway 34. The Iowa Ordnance Plant was built in anticipation of the coming of World War. Agency Road was cut off by the plant. The road picks up again on the west side of the Ordnance Plant near the Long Creek United Methodist Church. Somewhere in this vicinity was the location of the first parish post office. It went into operation in 1848 and served southwest Des Moines County, as well as parts of Henry and Lee counties. The second parish post office was in this building, located at the junction of Agency and Jimtown Roads. It was in operation from 1867 to around 1900. A family lives in the building today. A wagon would have reached the parish post office sometime around 11 a.m. They would have stopped to let the animals graze for a couple of hours and fix their own lunch. After leaving parish, we travel to the western edge of Des Moines County. This area was at one time called Jugtown. In 1848, two German immigrants, David and Dennis Melcher, had a pottery in this area. The high-quality clay attracted several other potteries. The Melcher Pottery Building is a residence today. Not far from Jugtown, we cross into Henry County and the entrance to Geode State Park. Lake Geode was formed in the late 1930s when a dam was built to catch water from a small creek. The area became a state park in 1937. This 1930s aerial view shows the route that Agency Road took before the lake was formed. When the lake is superimposed on the 1930s photo, you can see that a section of Agency Road was covered with water. The old section of the road is under the lake at this spot. In the spring of 2018, the lake was drained to make improvements and the old section was exposed. On the western side of the lake, near the old route, is all that is left of an Agency Road sign. A tree grew up and around it. The native people had their signs as well. This is an Indian tree trail marker. They bent over a young tree and strapped it to the ground. Then they cut off the end of the tree and allowed a single branch to grow straight up. The tree then became a sign that pointed the direction of the trail. Agency Road was rerouted over the dam. We now travel along the southern portion of Henry County, Iowa. Going a short distance, we approach Lowell, Iowa. In the late 1800s, the road into the village looked like this. One early traveler was quoted as saying,
"I've heard a great deal about Iowa mud, and now sod it to my heart's content."
Lowell grew up near Smith's Mill on the Skunk River. The mill was built in 1838, and there's a marker in Lowell to memorialize its history. Lowell was founded in 1840 and was originally called Smith's Mill. It was later renamed McCarverstown, and in 1843 changed it to Lowell, after Lowell, Massachusetts. At one time, Lowell had 4 hotels, a blacksmith shop, a sawmill, a shoemaker, tailor, hatter, a copper shop, a cabinet maker, a butcher, a church, and a woolen mill. Another historical marker in Lowell reads,
Agency Road, oldest road in Iowa, established 1841 by Territorial Legislature of Iowa.
Even though the Dubuque Road was established by Congress at the same time, Agency Road was probably in use earlier and subsequently entitled to the honor of being the oldest road in Iowa. In the early days, travelers had to ford the Skunk River when the water was low. Later, Lowell was serviced by ferries. The ferries went out of business when the bridge was built in 1880. The current bridge was built in 1976. If you look to the side while crossing the bridge, you will see remnants of the mill dam and the first bridge. The nearby hamlet named Baltimore was abandoned after it was bypassed by Agency Road. Stagecoaches were a major means of transportation in Iowa between the early 1830s and the mid-1850s. One historian wrote that,
even though stagecoaches were plagued by muddy roads, hostile Indians, winter blizzards, prairie fires, and robbers, communities without their service faded from existence.
Stagecoach travel was eventually replaced by the railroads. Most of the small towns without a railroad line disappeared as well. We continue our travels across Henry County. Ahead is a road branching to the left. That was the original route of Agency Road. A small town called East Grove was located on the southern route. It was founded in 1849 when this Quaker meeting house opened nearby. East Grove was home to abolitionists and conductors of fugitive slaves on the Underground Railroad. All that is left of East Grove is its cemetery. A covered bridge crossed Little Creek at the other end of the southern route. It was built in 1875, but eventually succumbed to frequent flooding. The northern route of Agency Road eventually replaced the southern route. As we continue to travel across Henry County, we come to what is left of Boylston, Iowa. Boylston was founded in 1841. It had 6 or 7 houses, a dam, a mill, and a ferry. This building was built in 1850 and served as the Boylston Post Office from 1863 to around 1893. Boylston is almost 20 miles from Burlington. Wagon travelers would have reached here around 5 p.m. and stopped for the night. After putting the animals out to graze, they too would have had their supper. A few more miles west is the town of Salem, Iowa. Salem was founded in 1835 and is still an active town. Salem was also settled by Quakers. The Llewellyn House was a station on the Underground Railroad. Up ahead and on the left is where the southern and northern routes of Agency Road come back together. We enter Hillsboro at the western edge of Henry County. Hillsboro was founded in 1840 and was originally called Washington. When they applied for a post office, they were told another city in Iowa already had that name. They renamed themselves Hillsboro. At one time, Hillsboro had 3 churches, a school, a flour mill, and 3 stores. Hillsboro has a significant historical marker in its town square. It reads,
2 military roads built in 1839 intersected in this town when known as Washington, Iowa Territory. One originated in Dubuque and continued to the Missouri state line. The other ran from Burlington to Agency City, Iowa.
We cross into Van Buren County after leaving Hillsboro. Agency Road fell into disrepair in these parts and was replaced with a network of new roads built by settlers. Based on early land surveys, we can approximate the original route and travel it as close as we can. What was Agency Road at this point is today an unmaintained road that eventually comes to a dead end. Though this road looks rough by today's standards, it's many times better than the original. Traveling on through Van Buren County, we approach the site of the former city of Winchester. Winchester was founded in 1848. It had a post office, a hotel, a drugstore, 4 churches, and the infamous Phelps Brothers Tavern. As many as 300 people lived in Winchester, but it began to decline after they opposed the railroad coming through their city. This long-gone building housed the Vigilante Winchester Anti-Horse Thief Association. All that is left of Winchester is their cemetery. An 1830s land survey shows Agency Road heading up to the hamlet of Parkersville. It was founded around 1840 and existed until at least 1857. Little is known of it except that it failed to flourish. A few miles further, we enter Birmingham, Iowa. was laid out in 1839. We leave Birmingham and soon cross into Jefferson County. Up ahead is the former location of the small hamlet of Colette. It was a station on the Peavine Railroad that ran from Fort Madison, Iowa to nearby Batavia. Colette was established in 1887. When train service was discontinued in 1939, the city was abandoned. Even the postmaster's home is gone. This unassuming spot southeast of Libertyville, Iowa, has historical significance. After the 1832 conflict that has come to be called the Black Hawk War, this area became the boundary between the land title to the U.S. government and the domain of the Sauk and Meskwaki. Shortly, we enter Libertyville, Iowa. Libertyville was laid out in 1842. In the center of the town is a historical marker that reads,
"Here passed the Dragoon Trails, blazed in 1835 by the 1st U.S. Dragoons under Colonel Stephen W. Kearney."
Another unassuming area is about a mile west of Libertyville. In 1838, the Sauk and Meskwaki ceded more land to the U.S. government. That new boundary was in this vicinity. Along this portion of Agency Road were several small towns: Absecom, County Line, and Cotton Grove. Absecom was located somewhere near here. When the stagecoach picked Absecom for a station in 1855, it was also given a post office, and the one in nearby Cotton Grove was then closed. The village of County Line was located near here. When the Rock Island Railroad put a depot there in 1876, the government selected it for a post office and closed the one in Absecom. That led to Absecom's downfall. County Line had two houses, a church, an elevator, a depot, and a post office. The village disappeared after the railroad line closed in 1932. As we cross into Wapello County, we approach the location of the former village of Cotton Grove. Little is known of it other than it had a post office at one time. As we move further into Wapello County, we approach the western end of Agency Road. The city of Agency, Iowa was given its name because the Sauk and Meskwaki nations had their agency nearby. The agency was in what is now a small park honoring Chief Wapello. A historical marker in the park reads,
The stone marks the site of the Agency House, which stood about 50 yards east. Agency House was built by General Joseph M. Street.
Actually, slave labor from Missouri built the agency. Wagons would have arrived at the agency about 5 days after leaving Burlington. That is assuming they did not get stuck in the mud, broke down in the ruts, or were attacked. Today, we can get from Burlington to Agency in less than an hour.